Explosions, car chases, fistfights. We watch them unfold on screen, trusting in the illusion. Everything feels under control. Every blast is rehearsed, every risk calculated. But that illusion? It rarely extends beyond the lens. Behind many of cinema's biggest action spectacles lies a reality far messier. Stuntmen hospitalized, directors fired mid-scene, cast members refusing to speak, crews fractured by fear, chaos, and decisions made under extreme pressure. What's billed as controlled chaos often turns into something else entirely. Real chaos, raw, unfiltered, and impossible to edit out. Some of these films teetered on the edge of collapse. Others lost lives. In many cases, the stories of what happened off-camera are more gripping, more tragic, and more unbelievable than anything ever written in a script. Studios tried to bury the damage. Publicists rewrote timelines. Actors were silenced. But the scars remain in interviews, court records, and in the haunted silence of those who were there. This isn't a list of box office flops. These were massive productions. Acclaimed, celebrated, even legendary, but under the surface, they were burning. Welcome to the other side of the camera. Let's uncover 15 action films where the real explosions happened when the cameras stopped rolling. Fact has own Mad Max, Fury Road. From the outside, it looked like a controlled explosion, pure cinematic anarchy choreographed down to the last frame. But Fury Road wasn't just chaos on screen. The real storm brewed between the two leads. Filming in the Namibian desert pushed everyone to the brink, but none more than Tom Hardy and Charlize Theron. From day one, their relationship soured. She found him erratic and volatile. He saw her as distant and inflexible. They clashed constantly, not in character, but in real life. Theron grew so uncomfortable that she reportedly demanded a producer be present during their scenes. Hardy, reflecting later, admitted he'd been difficult, overwhelmed by the isolation and the pressure of filling Mel Gibson's boots. George Miller, the mastermind behind the madness, kept rolling. And in a strange way, that hostility translated into electric tension on screen. The silence between Max and Furiosa, that wasn't acting. It was barely contained contempt. The film, against all odds, became a critical triumph, praised for its controlled fury. But the people who made it knew the truth. There was nothing controlled about that set, and the heat of the desert was just the beginning. Next, we scale icy peaks and face a shoot that nearly broke bones and the bank. Fact 2. Cliffhanger. Sometimes, the danger isn't what the audience sees, it's what the crew narrowly avoids. Cliffhanger was built on risk. Filmed in the unforgiving Italian Alps, the production placed Sylvester Stallone on literal cliffs, with camera crews dangling beside him. But what really pushed the shoot toward collapse was everything happening just outside the frame. A stunt coordinator reportedly quit after safety measures were overlooked. Winds at altitude nearly sent equipment and people tumbling into the abyss. One stunt involving a mid-air plane transfer went wrong due to turbulence, requiring emergency grounding and a rework of the scene. Then came the money problems. Carolco Pictures, the studio backing the film, was on the verge of financial ruin. Midway through shooting, the budget was slashed. Key sequences were abandoned. Stallone, determined to finish what he'd started, put up his own cash to keep things moving and rewrote parts of the script to make it cheaper. When it hit theaters, Cliffhanger looked seamless, a winter thrill ride. But behind the lens, the foundation was cracking. Up next, a stunt too real. One take went viral. The second one never should have happened. Fact hash 3. XXX, 2002. Extreme sports, explosive action. A star who sells himself as fearless. But one scene in XXX wasn't performed by Vin Diesel, and it cost a man his life. The film needed a signature stunt, a motorbike leap off a bridge, landing on a moving boat. It had to be real, so they brought in veteran stuntman Harry O'Connor. The first take? Perfect. The footage would go on to become a centerpiece of the film. But the second take, done for safety coverage, ended in tragedy. O'Connor lost control mid-air, crashing into a bridge support at deadly speed. He died instantly. What audiences eventually saw was that first flawless attempt. No dedication card, no mention in marketing. Just applause for the scene without knowing it had cost someone everything. Director Rob Cohen later said O'Connor died doing what he loved. But the mood on set changed. Several high-risk sequences were scaled back. The danger, once embraced as part of the brand, suddenly became real. And yet, some actors don't need stuntmen to risk their lives. One star insisted on doing it all himself, until the cliff almost took him. Fact hash 4. Mission Impossible 2. You've heard the stories. Tom Cruise does his own stunts. But Mission Impossible 2 was the moment that myth nearly became tragedy. The opening scene is unforgettable. Ethan Hunt free climbing a red rock cliff, suspended over a deadly drop. No stunt double, no safety net. Cruise insisted on performing it himself. He trained for months. He rehearsed every move. And still, he slipped. The fall didn't make it into the film, but the terror was real. His harness held barely. The crew was paralyzed. Director John Woo refused a second take. "We got the shot," he said. "I'm not risking it again." Later, during a knife fight sequence, Cruise had a real blade inches from his eye. The team rigged it with a cable to stop it mid-swing. The margin for error? Millimeters. It wasn't just method acting, it was a level of risk no insurance policy could cover. Paramount was reportedly furious, but Cruise's contract gave him control. In the end, the film was a hit. But had anything gone wrong, it wouldn't have been an action movie. It would have been an obituary. And while Cruise tested gravity, another director tested patience, turning an underwater epic into a 6-hour drowning session. Fact #5. The Abyss. When James Cameron dreams, Cruise panic. The Abyss wasn't just a movie, it was a trial by water. The film's underwater scenes were filmed inside an abandoned nuclear reactor, converted into one of the largest water tanks in film history. The cast and crew spent entire days submerged. Communication was minimal. Air supply was everything. Ed Harris nearly drowned. During a take, his regulator failed. As he surfaced in a panic, no one was nearby to assist. Later, he broke down, then reportedly punched Cameron in frustration. Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio, after being forced to reshoot a violent CPR scene multiple times, screamed at the director and walked off set. One crew member referred to the set simply as trauma. Cameron pressed on, undeterred. The visuals were groundbreaking. The result? An Oscar-winning spectacle. But those who filmed it didn't remember the accolades. They remembered the panic, the pressure, and the feeling that one mistake might mean more than just a ruined shot. Next up, we head above water, but no less dangerous. A city alive with crime becomes the real set for a film that blurred fact and fiction. Fact #6. Man on Fire. Man on Fire was supposed to be intense. It wasn't supposed to feel dangerous. But filming in the heart of Mexico City brought real violence dangerously close to fiction. Denzel Washington starred as a bodyguard, unraveling in a world of kidnappings and cartel brutality. But while the film's drama was scripted, the danger wasn't. Production was shadowed by threats from local criminal groups. Rumors spread that gang members were tracking the crew. Then, the warning became, reality shots rang out just blocks from the set. A fixer was attacked. Filming stopped. The crew operated under armed protection. Locations were moved. Scenes rewritten. Even the director, Tony Scott, reportedly wore a bulletproof vest at one point. The tension didn't end there. Scott clashed with the studio over tone. They wanted something clean. He delivered something raw. He won, but at a cost. Denzel later said he'd never felt more exposed while filming. He didn't need to act the fear. It was already there. And if you think that was intense, wait until you see what happens when a film tries to conquer the ocean and ends up nearly drowning in it. Fact #7. Waterworld 1995. Few films have flirted with collapse the way Waterworld did. The idea sounded simple. Mad Max on the ocean. What followed was a logistical nightmare that nearly drowned the entire production. The floating set, massive and complex, was built off the coast of Hawaii. Then came a storm, a real one. The entire structure was destroyed. Rebuilding cost millions. Days were lost, tempers flared. At the center of it all was Kevin Costner, star, producer, and the man everyone blamed or depended on. Crew members whispered about his private yacht, anchored nearby, while they slept on cramped boats. He reportedly micromanaged the script, clashed with the director, and rejected several key creative decisions. Budget overruns skyrocketed past $175 million. At the time, it was the most expensive film ever made. Executives panicked. Some begged for Costner to be reined in. No one succeeded. Against all odds, Waterworld was completed. And while it wasn't a total failure at the box office, it became a symbol of ambition, unchecked, of scale without control, and of a production that nearly sank under its own weight. And where Waterworld merely sank dreams, the next film took something far more irreversible. Fact #8. The Crow 1994. Some accidents are so devastating, they overshadow everything else. The Crow was already dark in tone, but it became permanently haunted the moment Brandon Lee collapsed on set. The scene required a prop gun, a blank round, a moment of tension, but a fragment of a dummy bullet had been lodged in the barrel from a previous take. When the blank was fired, it propelled the fragment directly into Lee's body. He died hours later. Filming halted. For a while, no one knew if the movie would be finished at all, but insurance complications and financial pressure pushed the studio to continue. With body doubles, careful angles, and early digital effects, The Crow was completed and released to critical acclaim. But tragedy wasn't the only shadow over this production. Accidents had plagued the set for weeks. Crew injuries, near electrocutions, storms, rumors of a curse. Many walked away believing the film had taken more than it gave. Today, The Crow is a cult classic, but it's also a grave marker, a symbol of a young actor's final performance and the price of one overlooked detail. And while some disasters are accidents, others are born from ego, isolation, and a star who stopped showing up. Fact #9. Blade. Trinity, 2004. What happens when your lead actor stops playing the part even when the camera's rolling? On Blade, Trinity, Wesley Snipes. Once the driving force behind the franchise seemed to vanish into himself, he rarely left his trailer. When he did, he refused to make eye contact with cast or crew. Director David Goyer reportedly received notes from Snipes written on sticky pads. That was their only form of communication. On set, body doubles stood in for him more often than not. Scenes were stitched together without his presence. Ryan Reynolds, who co-starred, later described the atmosphere as miserable. Tensions boiled over. At one point, rumors swirled that Snipes tried to physically confront Goyer. Though denied by both parties, the damage was done. The set fractured, morale sank, filming limped to a finish. The result? A movie that felt disconnected, disjointed, stripped of the spark that made the first two Blade films so sharp. Fans noticed, critics pounced, and in Hollywood circles, Blade. Trinity became a cautionary tale, not about vampires, but about what happens when the star of your movie stops acting entirely. Coming up, a legendary director loses his grip, the jungle closes in, and the crew begins to wonder if they'll ever make it out. Fact #0. Apocalypse Now. 1979. Some directors seek perfection. Francis Ford Coppola pursued something deeper and nearly lost himself in the process. Apocalypse Now was never going to be a typical war movie. From the beginning, the jungle seemed cursed. Typhoons wiped out entire sets. Local politics complicated production. The boundaries between fiction and reality blurred. Martin Sheen, deep into the role and deeper into personal demons, suffered a heart attack while filming. He barely survived. Marlon Brando arrived grossly overweight, unprepared, and unwilling to follow the script. Coppola rewrote scenes on the fly. He borrowed more money. He kept shooting. Cameras rolled in chaos. Schedules dissolved. Coppola confessed he wasn't making a film anymore, he was trying to survive it. The final cut was hailed as a masterpiece. But those who were there don't describe it in cinematic terms. They talk about exhaustion, breakdown, madness. Apocalypse Now wasn't just a film, it was an experience people had to recover from. And just when you think a film can't spiral further, one actor walks off mid-production, leaving everyone scrambling. Fact #1. The Man from UNCLE, 2015. Stylish, sleek, sharp. That's how The Man from UNCLE looked on screen. But behind the scenes, one of its stars went missing, and not in the script. Armie Hammer, cast alongside Henry Cavill, left the production midway through shooting. He flew home unexpectedly, reportedly due to disputes over scheduling and contract term. For days, no one knew if he'd return. Director Guy Ritchie was livid. Scenes had to be rewritten. Entire sequences were scrapped. Cavill ended up carrying scenes written for 2 actors alone. The studio stepped in, trying to mediate. Meanwhile, tension simmered. To finish the movie, editors leaned heavily on footage already shot. Body doubles and clever angles did the rest. Hammer did return, but not before the production lost precious time, budget, and patience. The result was a fun, fast-paced film. But behind that energy was a shoot patched together by necessity and silence. Next, we head to the desert, where the heat wasn't just in the script, and the director clashed so hard with his star, fists nearly flew. Fact #2. Three Kings, 1999. War films often deal in chaos. Three Kings brought it straight to the set. Director David O. Russell had a reputation for being demanding. George Clooney had one for being unshakably professional. They were never meant to work together. On set, Russell pushed everyone hard. Some crew members said he crossed the line, berating assistants and shouting without warning. Clooney objected. The two clashed repeatedly, culminating in a physical altercation that became legend. Clooney allegedly grabbed Russell by the throat after witnessing him explode on a crew member. The atmosphere turned sour, the cast fractured, the shoot was tense, volatile, and unpredictable. Warner Brothers considered replacing Russell, but stuck with him. After early cuts impressed test audiences, the final product was acclaimed, funny, brutal, and bold. But Clooney never worked with Russell again. He later called it the worst experience of his career. For everyone involved, Three Kings was a film forged in conflict, and it left scars no award could cover. Next, a script with no ending, a panic in the editing room, and a desperate attempt to save a sinking blockbuster. Fact Hasson 3, World War Z, 2013. The zombies weren't the real threat. The real monster was the screenplay. With World War Z, Paramount aimed for a blockbuster, an apocalyptic epic starring Brad Pitt. But halfway through production, a quiet crisis erupted. No one liked the ending. It didn't work. It didn't land. In test screenings, audience left confused. So the studio hit the brakes. Cameras stopped rolling. The third act, the massive climax filmed in Moscow, was scrapped entirely. Writers Damon Lindelof and Drew Goddard were flown in. The script was overhauled from page 80 onward. Weeks of footage were thrown out. The cast and crew sat idle for over a month. Crew members feared cancellation. Pitt, also a producer, held the project together by force of will. The rewritten version took the story in a totally different direction, smaller, more intimate, and, ironically, more effective. World War Z went on to earn over $500 million, but the chaos behind its resurrection was buried beneath the marketing. For most viewers, it was just another action film. For those who made it, it was a salvage mission. But the next film lost something even more precious. Not footage, not money, a human life. Fact Hasson 4, Gladiator, 2000. Oliver Reed was unforgettable in Gladiator. He was also gone before filming ended. Reed, cast as Proximo, the hardened gladiator trainer, passed away suddenly of a heart attack during a production break in Malta. His death left Ridley Scott with a dilemma. Vital scenes hadn't been shot, and the character's arc was unfinished. Rewriting was nearly impossible. The character mattered too much. Instead, the team opted for a digital resurrection, a radical decision in 2000. Using stand-ins, clever lighting, and cutting-edge CGI, they reconstructed Reed's final scenes. It was one of the earliest, most ambitious uses of digital doubles in cinema. The process cost millions. It required absolute secrecy, and it worked. Audiences barely noticed, but for the cast and crew, it was eerie. They weren't just finishing a performance, they were resurrecting a man. And with every take, the absence felt heavier. Reed's performance lives on. His ghost, in many ways, haunts the film quietly but unmistakably. Our final story pushes things even further. A director is fired mid-shoot, an actor rebels, and the jungle descends into madness. Fact Hasson 5, The Island of Dr. Moreau, 1996. This wasn't just a troubled shoot. This was a meltdown disguised as a movie. The Island of Dr. Moreau began with promise. A classic novel, a unique vision, and a cast led by Val Kilmer and Marlon Brando. But days into production, the dream shattered. Director Richard Stanley was dismissed abruptly after clashing with studio heads and cast. But instead of leaving, he secretly stayed nearby, disguising himself and slipping back onto set as an extra watching the chaos he'd once commanded. His replacement, veteran director John Frankenheimer, inherited a disaster. Brando refused to follow the script. Kilmer sabotaged takes. Extras revolted. The set, built in the jungles of Australia, became a nightmare. Actors walked off. Crew members wept. Some scenes were filmed with barely functioning dialogue just to move forward. When the film was finally stitched together, what emerged was a bizarre, uneven mess that no one truly recognized. Today, it's remembered more for the insanity behind it than anything on screen. A cautionary tale of power struggles, unchecked egos, and a production that didn't just go wrong, it imploded. Bonus fact, Roar, 1981. Some films flirt with danger. Roar stared directly into its jaws. Conceived as a family passion project, Roar brought together actress Tippi Hedren, her husband Noel Marshall, and their daughter Melanie Griffith in a film meant to celebrate the majesty of big cats. But instead of trained animals, the production invited over 150 untamed lions, tigers, leopards, and cheetahs into the house and let the cameras roll. The results were horrifying. Crew members were mauled. Marshall was bitten so many times he contracted gangrene. Hedren was tossed off an elephant and broke her leg. Griffith needed facial reconstructive surgery after a lion slashed her near the eye. Cinematographer Jan de Bont was scalped, requiring over 200 stitches. Insurance dropped out. Doctors were stationed on set full-time. Nearly every member of the cast and crew was injured at some point, and yet production continued for 11 years. The footage is surreal, terrifying, real. There are no effects, no animatronics. Every roar, every lunge, every attack actually happened. When Roar was finally released, it was a box office failure. But in the decades since, it has earned a new legacy, not as a family drama, but as one of the most dangerous, reckless, and bizarre films ever made. No one died. But that's probably the most unbelievable part of all. You've seen the polished versions, the trailers, the posters, the explosions, carefully timed to a beat. But now you know what it took to get there. The fights, the breakdowns, the moments no one was supposed to talk about. So tell us, which of these films left you stunned? Which line should never have been crossed? And is cinematic greatness ever worth this kind of chaos? Let us know. We're listening after the curtain falls.